The fall of Earth. It happened so fast. One moment, Earth was alive with the sound of people, cities glowing under the night sky. The next moment, fire rained from above. Giant alien ships, dark as shadows, hovered over the world. Their weapons were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. In just 72 hours, Earth fell. The invaders called themselves the Xoreth Empire. They were tall, with sharp armor-like skin and glowing red eyes. Their technology was thousands of years ahead. Human weapons, guns, tanks, even nuclear bombs were useless against them. The Xoreth had shields that stopped everything. They crushed human armies like insects. Governments fell. Cities burned. Billions died. By the third day, there was no more war. There was no more Earth, at least not as humans knew it. A world in chains. The Xoreth did not kill everyone. They had a different plan. "We do not destroy." Their leader, High Warlord Krellin, spoke through massive screens in every city. "We conquer. You are now part of the Xoreth Empire." Survivors were gathered like cattle. Some were enslaved, forced to work in the ruins of their own cities. Others were taken for experiments. No one ever saw them again. The Xoreth saw humans as nothing more than weak creatures, good only for labor and testing. A small boy named Adam, hiding in the ruins of New York, watched as his mother was taken away. She told him to run, to hide. He did, but he never forgot the look on her face. Across the world, similar stories unfolded. Fathers torn from their children. Soldiers forced to kneel before their conquerors. Scientists captured to work for the Xoreth. Yet, the worst part was hope had died. Humans had always believed they were strong, that they could fight anything. But now, they were nothing. Or so that Xoreth thought. The first mistake. High Warlord Krellin sat in his command center aboard the Dominion, the Xoreth flagship orbiting Earth. He watched as his forces patrolled the broken cities. Victory was complete. Or was it? "Sir," a Xoreth officer reported, "there is resistance." Krellin laughed, his sharp teeth showing. "What resistance? These humans have nothing left." "Small groups," the officer admitted. "They hide. They attack in the shadows. They steal weapons. They are difficult to eliminate." Krellin frowned. He had seen conquered worlds before. Every time, there were a few survivors who refused to accept reality. But they always died, sooner or later. Still, something about the humans was different. Their cities were destroyed. Their armies were gone. Their weapons were useless. And yet, they still fought. Why? In the shadows, deep in the underground tunnels of Paris, a group of survivors gathered. Among them was Dr. Elias Carter, a former scientist. He had seen what the Xoreth did to captured humans. He had seen their technology up close, and he had an idea. "We can't fight them head-on," he told the group. "But we don't have to. We need to fight them the way they don't expect." "How?" someone asked. "They have lasers, ships, shields. We have nothing." Dr. Carter smiled. "No, we have something more powerful than their weapons. We have our minds." The group listened as he explained his plan. It was risky. It was dangerous. But it was possible. They were not soldiers. They were scientists, hackers, engineers, and survivors. And they were about to start a war. The first strike. 1 week after the fall of Earth, an alien supply ship exploded in the middle of Moscow. It wasn't an accident. Someone had hacked into the ship's controls. Someone had planted a virus. Krellin watched the explosion from his command center. His eyes narrowed. "Who did this?" he growled. No human had access to Xoreth technology. No human should even understand how to hack their systems. Yet, someone had. The resistance had begun. The suspense ends with a question. Deep in the mountains of South America, in a hidden bunker, Dr. Carter and his team watched the explosion on a small screen. "It worked," one of them whispered. Dr. Carter nodded. "This is just the beginning." But then, something unexpected happened. A message appeared on their hacked system, not from the Xoreth, from someone else. It was only 3 words. You are not alone. Who had sent the message? Another resistance group, a hidden ally, or something even bigger. The fight for humanity had just begun. The resistance awakens. They thought we were extinct. They thought we were broken. They forgot one thing. Humans don't die easy. The whisper of ghosts. High Warlord Krellin stood in his command chamber, staring at the holographic map of Earth. Every major city was under Xoreth control. Every resistance had been crushed. And yet, the whispers wouldn't stop. Ghost attacks. That's what his officers called them. A patrol unit in the ruins of London vanished without a trace. A weapons facility in New York exploded overnight. A high-ranking Xoreth general was found dead in his quarters, throat slit with a human blade. No alarms, no evidence, just silent vengeance. Krellin growled, his clawed fingers digging into the armrest of his chair. Who is doing this? The Xoreth Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds before Earth. No species had ever fought back like this. No species had been so persistent. Humans should be broken. They should be slaves, prisoners, or corpses. Instead, they were becoming something else. The man with no name. Somewhere deep in the mountains of Asia, in an abandoned military bunker, a group of survivors sat in silence. The air was thick with tension. A single oil lamp flickered, casting shadows against the walls. At the center of the group sat a man. No one knew his real name. Some called him Ghost, others called him Commander Zero. He wasn't a scientist like Dr. Elias Carter. He wasn't a hacker. He wasn't an engineer. He was something far more dangerous. He was a soldier without a war. Until now. Ghost's voice was calm, cold, and sharp like a blade. The Xoreth believe they've won. That's their first mistake. He stood, stepping into the dim light. His face was scared. His eyes were like steel. We will not fight them in the open. We will not challenge their technology. We will not play by their rules. The room was silent. Ghost took a deep breath. His next words sent chills through the group. We will teach them fear. The first blow. That night, the Xoreth headquarters in Berlin fell silent. No alarms, no warnings, just silence. When morning came, the Xoreth soldiers stationed there were found hanging from the ruins, a message carved into their armor. You are not safe. Panic spread through the alien ranks. They had crushed Earth in 3 days. But now, something was hunting them. Something they could not see. The turning point. Deep in the ruins of Tokyo, Dr. Elias Carter and his team watched through hacked Xoreth monitors. They saw the fear in the alien's glowing red eyes. He turned to his people, his voice filled with determination. This is it. This is the moment we shift the war. A young engineer, a woman named Aisha, frowned. But how? They have ships, weapons, armies. We have tactics. Dr. Carter smiled. Yes, and that's why we'll win. Aisha didn't understand. Not yet. But soon, the whole galaxy would. The Xoreth's realization. High Warlord Krellin slammed his fist onto the control panel, his voice a growl of frustration. Enough of this. Find them. Kill them all. His officers hesitated. One of them, a young Xoreth strategist, swallowed hard. Sir, I don't think they're trying to win. Krellin's eyes narrowed. What? The officer's hands shook as he spoke. They're not fighting a war. They're waging terror. They want us to feel hunted. They want us to fear the dark. A long silence filled the command room. Then, for the first time since conquering Earth, Krellin felt something he had never felt before. Fear, a message from the shadows. In a hidden location, Ghost watched the chaos unfold through intercepted signals. The Xoreth were panicking. Perfect. He pressed a button on an old, cracked radio. Across the ruined cities, in the silence of occupied Earth, a signal was sent. A voice, deep and clear, echoed across every surviving human radio. They took our world, but they forgot one thing: a pause. This is our home, and we are coming for them. The resistance had awakened, and the war had just begun. The unbreakable spirit. They thought we were animals. They had no idea. We are wolves. A night of silence, a morning of fear. The Xoreth Empire controlled Earth, or so they believed. But something had changed. In the beginning, humans ran. They hid. They died in the streets. The Xoreth watched with amusement, calling them a weak and broken species. Now the aliens feared the night, because in the darkness something hunted them. Xoreth patrols vanished without a trace. Weapons stockpiles exploded before they could be used. High-ranking Xoreth officers were found dead, throats cut, armor stripped, bodies left hanging as a warning. It was no longer a battle for survival. It was a war of terror. And for the first time, the Xoreth were afraid. The ghosts of humanity. Inside the ruined tunnels beneath London, a group of resistance fighters sat in a dimly lit bunker. The air smelled of dirt, oil, and sweat. At the center of the group, standing over a worn-out map, was Ghost. He pointed at several red-marked locations on the map. In 2 weeks, we have taken down 7 Xoreth outposts, stolen 4 supply drops, and eliminated 20 high-ranking officers. The fighters around him nodded. Some were ex-soldiers, others were civilians who had learned to fight. A young man named Daniel, barely 20, clenched his fists. But there are still thousands of them. How do we win against that? Ghost's cold eyes met his. We don't win by fighting their war. We win by making them wish they never started it. Silence. Then a voice from the back spoke up. A woman stepped forward, her face hidden under a hood. She was known only as Raven. "They are starting to break," she said. Intercepted transmissions show lower-level Xoreth troops asking for transfers off Earth. They are afraid. Ghost smirked. "Good. We make them fear us even more," he said. "We do the impossible. We steal a Xoreth ship." Gasps filled the bunker. A ship. That was suicide. But Ghost wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. "The Xoreth believe we are animals. Let's show them. We are predators." The hunt begins. 2 nights later, a Xoreth supply ship landed near the ruins of Cairo. It was an easy target. Minimal guards. Simple security. Or so that Xoreth thought. As soon as the last crate was unloaded, the shadows came alive. Silencers hissed. Blades flashed. Xoreth guards dropped without a sound. Ghost and Raven moved like phantoms through the wreckage. Each kill was precise, silent, controlled. Within 10 minutes, the ship belonged to humanity. Daniel sat at the controls, his fingers shaking. I've never flown anything like this." Raven patted his shoulder. "Good. That means the Xoreth won't expect it." Ghost's voice was calm. "Get us in the air. Let's send them a message they'll never forget." As the ship rose into the night sky, alarms blared across Xoreth command centers. A human had stolen a Xoreth warship. For the first time in history, a conquered species had struck back. The moment that changed everything. The stolen Xoreth ship didn't just escape. It flew straight into the heart of a Xoreth command base and unleashed hell. Missiles rained down. Fuel tanks exploded. Hangars collapsed. Xoreth soldiers ran in panic, screaming into their communicators. This wasn't possible. This shouldn't be happening. The Xoreth had crushed hundreds of worlds. No species had ever come back from total defeat. But this wasn't just any species. This was humanity. High Warlord Krellan's nightmare. Inside his flagship, Krellan watched the disaster unfold. His commanders were shouting. The stolen ship was causing chaos. More resistance cells were rising in every city. Krellan's claws gripped the armrest of his throne. His blood boiled. "This is impossible," he growled. A Xorath strategist hesitated before speaking. Sir, we underestimated them. We treated them like all the others. Krellon turned to face him, his red eyes burning with fury. Then tell me, strategist, he hissed, what makes these creatures different? The strategist swallowed hard, his voice shaking. They are not fighting for survival anymore. They are fighting for revenge. For the first time since the invasion, Krellon felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation crawl up his spine. He had felt pity for the weak species he had crushed. He had felt amusement at their useless attempts to resist. But now he felt something else, something he had never felt before. Doubt. And far away, hidden in the ruins, Ghost listened to the intercepted Xorath communications. He heard the fear in their voices. He smiled. Let's see how long they last. The weapon of humanity. We don't need your technology. We have something better. The fear of the unknown. High Warlord Krellon stood motionless in his command chamber. The air was thick with tension. His officers shifted nervously, avoiding his gaze. The holoscreens before him flickered with chaotic reports. Supply routes destroyed. High-ranking Xorath generals assassinated. A stolen warship still missing. Resistance growing at an uncontrollable rate. This wasn't a rebellion. This wasn't some scattered uprising. This was something else. Something dangerous. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were changing the war. Enough of this, Krellon growled, his claws scraping against the metal throne. Deploy more troops. Increase security. Burn their hiding places to the ground. His officers hesitated. One finally spoke. Sir, it's not that simple. They're unpredictable. They don't act like any species we've conquered before. Krellon's eyes narrowed. Explain. The officer took a deep breath. They don't fight for territory. They don't fight for control. They fight for something we don't understand. Krellon leaned forward. Then tell me, strategist, what is it that we don't understand? The officer's voice was barely a whisper. They fight because they refuse to kneel. A message from the depths. In a hidden underground bunker beneath the frozen wastelands of Antarctica, the leaders of the resistance gathered. A stolen Xorath holographic display flickered in the middle of the table. The face of Dr. Elias Carter appeared on the screen. His voice was calm but urgent. We have it, he said. Silence filled the room. Then, Ghost leaned forward. His voice, sharp as a knife, cut through the air. Are you sure? Dr. Carter nodded. Positive. The data is complete. We finally know what makes us different from the Xorath. What makes us stronger. A woman with dark eyes, known as Raven, crossed her arms. What is it? Dr. Carter exhaled. It's not our weapons. It's not our tactics. A flicker of emotion crossed his face. It's our minds. Ghost frowned. Explain. Dr. Carter's voice lowered. The Xorath are advanced, yes. Their ships, their shields, their weapons, far beyond anything we have. But their brains, they function on pure logic, on efficiency, on calculation. They do not evolve the way we do. They do not think like we do. Raven raised an eyebrow. And that means. Dr. Carter leaned in. His next words changed everything. It means they can't adapt like we can. The true weapon of humanity. For all their power, the Xorath only understood war in one way, through brute force, through superior numbers and technology. But humanity had survived extinction hundreds of times before. Not through strength, not through weapons, through adaptation, through ingenuity, through chaos. And now, the resistance had proof. We have something they will never have, Dr. Carter continued. We have creativity. We have emotion. We have unpredictability. Ghost's lips curled into a dangerous smile. Then let's use it. The experiment. That night, deep in the ruins of Moscow, the resistance tested their new weapon. Not a bomb, not a virus, not an energy weapon. something far more terrifying. It started with a simple broadcast hacked into the Xoreth communication network, a human voice, calm, cold, full of menace. To the Xoreth Empire, you think you have won. You think you understand us. But tell us, can you understand something that has no pattern? The message repeated across every occupied city. It did not stop. Then the real attack began. The resistance altered Xoreth weapons, turning their own technology against them. They used unpredictable, illogical attacks, ones no Xoreth strategist could predict. They spread false information, creating chaos among the ranks. And then, the nightmares began. Xoreth soldiers began hallucinating, seeing things that weren't there, hearing voices that whispered in the dark. Their minds, built for logic, could not handle human unpredictability. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't magic. It was simply something the Xoreth could not comprehend. Fear. Pure, raw, uncontrollable fear. The breaking point. On the Xoreth mothership, Krellin stared at the reports in horror. Soldiers abandoning their posts. Officers unable to process human tactics. Ships firing on each other in confusion. Krellin's claws gripped the armrest of his throne. This is impossible. His strategist trembled. Sir, they are not just fighting us anymore. They are inside our minds. The Xoreth had fought hundreds of wars, but this was something else. This was a war they didn't know how to fight. Krellin's breathing slowed. His mind raced. Then, for the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to be hunted. A new kind of war. Deep in the underground bunkers of the Resistance, Ghost listened to the intercepted transmissions. He heard the fear in the Xoreth's voices. He turned to his team, his expression unreadable. They thought they were the hunters. His eyes gleamed. They were wrong. We are humanity, and we are their extinction. The war had changed, and for the first time, the Xoreth were losing. The tipping point. They thought we were weak. Now, they run from us. The sound of fear. It started with a whisper, a low, eerie sound carried by the wind through the ruins of every fallen city, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of the Xoreth. They called it the Phantom Signal. No one knew where it came from. It couldn't be traced. It wasn't a distress call or a military broadcast. It was something worse. A slow, rhythmic chant in an unfamiliar human dialect. The same words, over and over. At first, the Xoreth ignored it, but then they started hearing it in their sleep. Officers reported hearing whispers when they were alone. Soldiers swore they saw shadows moving where there was nothing. Some even turned their weapons on each other, convinced the enemy was among them. The war had shifted. The Xoreth, the so-called conquerors of Earth, were no longer in control. Now, they were the ones being hunted. The vanishing army. In the cold wastelands of Siberia, an entire battalion of Xoreth forces disappeared overnight. Their last transmission was filled with static, but one phrase was clear. They're here. But when reinforcements arrived, they found no signs of battle. No human footprints. No broken weapons. No bodies. Just empty armor scattered across the snow. The Xoreth panicked. How could an army disappear without a fight? Where were the humans taking them? The answer was worse than they could imagine. The message they couldn't ignore. High Warlord Krellin stood before his war council. His red eyes burned with frustration. "Explain this to me," he growled. "How does an enemy with no fleet, no technology, no resources?" He slammed his fist onto the table. "Bring an empire to its knees." No one spoke, except one voice from the shadows. "Because they are not fighting a war," the voice said. A Xoreth intelligence officer stepped forward. His skin was pale, his voice shaking. "They are fighting a hunt. They are using our own minds against us." Krellin's claws tightened. "They are primitives." The officer swallowed. "Then why are our soldiers afraid to step outside after dark?" A chilling silence fell over the chamber. Then, a transmission interrupted the meeting. A video, broadcast across every Xoreth-controlled base. It showed a captured Xoreth commander, bound, gagged, eyes filled with terror. A human voice spoke, distorted but calm. "We were never your slaves. This is our home." The screen glitched, and the message changed. A single phrase burned itself into every Xoreth's mind. "Run." Then the screen went black. The War Council sat frozen. For the first time, Krellin had no orders to give. The fall of the mighty. The Xoreth, once fearless warriors, now avoided patrols at night. They stopped using certain roads, certain tunnels, certain buildings. They whispered among themselves. They spoke of the unseen. They feared humans. One by one, outposts fell, not through direct attacks, but through paranoia and isolation. The Xoreth were an empire built on dominance. But what happens when the dominant start to fear their prey? What happens when the prey stops running? The betrayal. In the heart of a Xoreth base, a single soldier hesitated. He had been raised to believe that the Xoreth were superior, that humanity was nothing, that Earth was theirs by right. But then, he heard the voices, not the phantom signal, not the whispers of fear. The real voices, the cries of human prisoners, the last words of those who had been experimented on, the desperate resistance fighters who died for a chance at freedom. For the first time, he doubted. And in that moment, he made a choice that would change everything. The storm on the horizon. Ghost stood atop the ruins of an old skyscraper, watching as Xoreth forces abandoned another city. Raven approached from behind. "They're breaking." Ghost didn't smile. He knew the truth. "They're not broken," he said. "Not yet." He turned, his eyes cold as steel. "But they will be." Because the resistance had done the impossible. The Xoreth were no longer the hunters. Now, they were the prey. And humanity. Humanity was just getting started. The wrath of humanity. "We were never your slaves. This is our home." The sound of war. It began as a whisper. Then it became a scream. For the first time since the invasion, the Xoreth were running. Not in retreat. Not in strategic withdrawal. They were fleeing. Entire bases were abandoned overnight. Once great strongholds of alien dominance now stood empty, their banners torn down, their symbols burned. This was not just resistance. This was revenge. And humanity was winning. The crumbling empire. High Warlord Krellin stood in his command chamber, his claws gripping the edges of the war table. The holographic display flickered, red indicators flashing across Earth. Not human-controlled zones, not Xoreth strongholds. Something else. Compromised zones. Areas where Xoreth forces could no longer operate. His officers spoke in hushed, nervous voices. "They are hitting us everywhere. We've lost control of the Pacific sector. The European division has gone silent. The Mars outpost received a distress call from Earth. They are requesting evacuation." Krellin's throat rumbled with rage. Evacuation. From primitive animals. The officer hesitated. Then he spoke the truth Krellin feared the most. "Sir, it is no longer war. It is eradication." A long silence followed. For the first time, the Xoreth understood what it meant to be hunted. The sky burns. Over the ruins of what was once Los Angeles. The sky ignited. The stolen Xoreth warship had returned. But this time, it wasn't alone. Hundreds of modified human aircraft, old-world fighter jets, and repurposed enemy drones swarmed through the air. They shouldn't have been able to fly. They shouldn't have been able to fight back. And yet they did. They moved like predators, using the clouds, the terrain, and the very chaos of war against the invaders. Inside the stolen warship, Ghost stood at the command deck, watching the battle unfold. A message from Raven came through his earpiece. Krellin's forces are crumbling. His fleet is still in orbit, but his ground forces are breaking. Ghost exhaled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Then we take the fight to them. He turned to his crew, his voice like steel. Set course for the Xoreth mothership. It was time to end this. The betrayal of the Xoreth. In the heart of the Xoreth war fleet, a single officer hesitated. His name was Vecrus. He had fought for the Xoreth Empire all his life. He had believed in its strength, in its dominance. But now, he saw the truth. The Xoreth were not gods. They were not invincible. And the humans, they were something else. They had no fleets, no advanced weapons, no superior genetics. And yet, they had turned the tide of war through sheer will. The Xoreth had miscalculated. They had conquered planets before, but never had they met a species that refused to stay conquered. Never had they met humans. And now, Vecrus had a choice: to die with a crumbling empire, or to switch sides. His fingers hovered over the controls. A single command would disable the mothership's shields. He thought of the battles, the deaths, the terror in the eyes of his own soldiers. Then, he made his choice. He pressed the button. And the mothership's defenses fell. The final battle. From the skies, Ghost and his team saw the breach. The shields flickered. The Xoreth mothership was vulnerable. This was their chance. "Take us in," Ghost ordered. The stolen warship roared toward the mothership, slipping through the weakened defenses before the Xoreth even realized what was happening. Inside, chaos erupted. Gunfire, explosions, the clash of steel and plasma. Ghost led the charge, his movements precise, calculated. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a hunter. One by one, the Xoreth fell. And deep inside the mothership, Krellon watched in disbelief. He had conquered countless worlds. He had crushed entire civilizations. Yet here, on this primitive, insignificant planet, his empire was dying. The end of an empire. Krellon stood in the final chamber, his personal guards fallen around him. The doors slid open. Ghost stepped in, his weapon lowered. Behind him, Raven and the rest of the resistance stood victorious. Krellon let out a slow breath, his glowing red eyes locking onto Ghost's. "You are not like the others we have conquered." Ghost tilted his head. "No," he said, "we are worse." And with that, he pulled the trigger. The dawn of a new age. The Xoreth Empire fell that night. With their warlord dead, their leadership shattered, and their forces in disarray, the once great invaders had only one option left. They ran. The resistance watched as Xoreth ships fled the planet, retreating into the dark abyss of space. Earth was free. But humanity was forever changed. Ghost stood on the remains of the mothership, looking at the burning sky. Raven approached him. "It's over." Ghost didn't smile. He knew the truth. "This war is over," he said, "but something tells me they'll be back." Raven nodded. "Then we'll be ready." The humans had survived. They had fought back. And now, they were no longer just a species. They were a force the galaxy would never forget. The true might of humanity had been revealed, and nothing would ever be the same again. The fall of the Xoreth Empire. Humanity doesn't just survive. We conquer. The echo of war. The Xoreth were gone. Their warships fled Earth, scattered and broken. Their banners lay burned in the streets. Their mighty warlord was dead, his empire shattered. But even in their defeat, their presence lingered. Cities were still ruins. Billions were still dead. The scars of war stretched across the world like a silent reminder. We won, but at what cost? As the first rays of sunlight broke over the wreckage of Earth, a single question remained. Was this truly the end? Or was it just the beginning? The last Xoreth soldier. In the wastelands of what was once Washington, D.C., a lone figure crawled through the rubble. His Toreth armor was cracked, his breathing ragged. He had seen too much. The battle. The chaos. the way his unstoppable empire had been torn apart by creatures they had once mocked. Humans. They weren't warriors. They weren't powerful. Yet, they had won. The Xoreth soldier shivered, not from the cold, but from something far worse. Fear. He had to warn them. He had to tell the others. He activated his emergency beacon, sending out a final distress signal. Far beyond Earth, beyond the stars, beyond the wreckage of a broken fleet, someone would hear it. Someone would come. The dawn of a new humanity. In the ruins of Berlin, Ghost stood atop the remains of a fallen Xoreth war machine. Below him, survivors gathered. Resistance fighters, civilians, former slaves, the last remnants of humanity. For the first time in years, they were free. Raven stepped beside him, eyes scanning the crowd. They're waiting for a speech. Ghost exhaled. He wasn't a leader. He was a soldier. But humanity needed more than just warriors now. He stepped forward, his voice carrying through the silence. They thought we were weak, he said. They thought we would kneel. He looked at the people, scarred, broken, but standing tall. They were wrong. A hush fell over the crowd. Ghost continued. The war is over, but our fight is not. We have won back our world, but now, we must rebuild it. He glanced up at the sky, where the last trails of retreating Xoreth ships disappeared into the void. They will return one day, he said, but when they do, they won't find the same Earth they left behind. A slow, determined smile crossed his face. When they return, they will find the new rulers of this world. The crowd erupted in cheers. Humanity was not just surviving. Humanity was rising. The signal from the void. Light years away, in the cold abyss of space, the distress signal reached a distant world, a planet of giants, a place where the Xoreth were not the rulers, but the ruled. A figure, taller than any Xoreth, listened. His skin was dark as night, his eyes burning with an eerie silver glow. He watched the transmission. Images of a dying warlord, of Xoreth warships burning, of humans standing victorious. He let out a deep, rumbling laugh. Interesting, he muttered. Then he turned to his council. Prepare the fleet. We go to Earth. And far, far away, beyond the known stars, something even worse than the Xoreth had just noticed humanity. The war was over. But the real battle had just begun.